Every story is important, and every story needs to be heard by someone, whether an audience of 1 or 1 million. Our stories are valuable because we have no idea the ripple effect it can have on generations to come. So join me in listening to stories of how unlikely people became unexpectedly connected. Their stories reveal that we were never meant to face life alone. And in helping one another, we end up finding ourselves and our purpose. Welcome to Letters from the Chosen. All right. Well, welcome everyone. Today I have two very special guests with me. Well, they're my mom and dad, and I'm so excited for you guys to get to know them a little bit better and hear more about our story and how we got connected. So without further ado, welcome mom and dad.
Yeah.
Good to be here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks for having us.
I'm glad you guys are here. So how you guys doing?
We're good.
You're doing good. Yeah.
Retired life's great.
So how's it feeling returning back to New Jersey and kind of getting settled here again?
I think it was a good decision, right? We moved to Milwaukee for a job, right? And then when I retired from there, we decided to move back to the East Coast, although we really liked our life in Milwaukee and discussed staying there. But it was definitely the right decision to come back, be near family. Our extended family are all on the East Coast. Our kids are all nearby here. So it was great.
Mm-hmm.
We absolutely miss our church family back there and our friends, but this is a good place to be. It's good to be back.
Nice. So you moved to New Jersey, you moved out to Milwaukee, you came back. What first brought you to New Jersey and raising all of us here?
So when we got married, I was in the Navy, and we ultimately ended up being stationed in Norfolk, Virginia, and so we lived in Virginia Beach. And when I left active duty in the late 80s, we got a job here in southern New Jersey, and that's what caused us to move here back then.
I'm here for 25 years.
Yeah.
So you guys are in New Jersey, and we haven't met yet. So I know everybody's wondering, how did we get connected? I'm over in Ghana, and you guys have now moved to New Jersey. How did you guys hear about me? Mom, can you start us off?
Well, first we were, after we moved to New Jersey, we got connected with St. John's Church in Turnersville. And through that, we did some mission trips. Had done Mexico, Venezuela, and a trip came up to Ghana to go and support missionaries there that the church supported.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and originally you'd gone to those other trips because you had Spanish language skills, right?
Yep.
And I hadn't gone on those trips.
So when the trip to Ghana came up,
yeah.
Dad felt like
it was somewhat different in the sense that I felt like I was called to go as well. And we talked about whether that was practical, right? We had 2 young kids, and the, logistics of that isn't necessarily the easiest thing to do. But my mom came up and so on. And, and then financially it was a bit more expensive than the other trips because of the distance and the time. We were there for almost 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. So it was a bit of financial strain on us too, for us both to go, but we thought that's what God was asking us to do.
Well, so it's interesting because originally I wasn't going on that trip. I had been going to sign up for another trip to somewhere that was Spanish speaking, because that's what my background was. And my registration information never made it to the mission board. And so we ended up talking about whether or not I would go to Ghana when Dad went to Ghana and praying about that. And we ended up going there together. So kind of a God thing there too, that had not been my intention. My intention had been to do another trip to Mexico or South America.
Around what year was this, your first trip to Ghana?
1997. It was February.
Yeah.
It was around Valentine's Day, February 1997.
Okay, so now that's something I didn't know. I thought you guys had gone like in 95 or 96 and then came back.
I'd come back, but it all happened in 1997. Mm-hmm. So we were over there for about 10 days, maybe a little longer. In February of 97, worked with the mission team there, husband and wife, who had some American kids, and then they'd adopted at that point one boy from Ghana, and we worked with them for that time. It was a great trip. It was amazing. We saw some. It was a lot of hard work. It was interesting to see the culture. Some really amazing God stories happen, which we, could talk about. But
they were medical missionaries, and so we did work going out into the bush and doing vaccinations. We did some vacation Bible school, but we also worked on building quarters for doctors to be able to come. They were building a hospital in the village there. And so we worked because the doctor only came through every so often, like every other week or something. So we were helping to build a place for them to be able to come and for them to have a full-time medical person.
Yeah.
So, but the 1995 was the original trips that I took that went to South America and Mexico.
Okay. So on your first trip, did you guys meet me or did you come and then go? How did that work?
We did a bunch of stuff in this. We did a bunch of stuff in the schools there. That toured the schools, did some things with the kids at the schools, but we didn't specifically meet you there. You weren't enrolled in the school. We found out later, but so we found out for sure we had never met you when we were there on our trip in February. Although, many things about your life were very similar to what we did meet and see in the the families and the culture there. But
we've been to your village,
right?
But I don't know. Maybe you were in the crowd.
Sure.
But we have no idea. We didn't actually
Right.
physically be introduced to you. Didn't know anything about your story at that time.
All right. So you've come to Ghana. You help serve. And you guys are working. Is that when you're working on the hospital?
Yep.
Okay. You're doing all that. You're going to the schools. And then you leave.
Right.
So
Trip ends, we go home. Right.
how do we get connected then later?
So the mission group that took us overseas had suggested that it's a good practice for after a time when you're home. These trips can sometimes cause people to have, thoughts and issues that you need someone to support and be able to talk through. You see things that are unusual for us. The poverty was pretty stark. We saw some medical needs that were, rough, some things that were not everyday things you see here in America. And so we had a post-team meeting a couple months after we were back.
Just to talk and pray and see how people were assimilating back into the
make sure
culture.
everybody was doing well. Yeah. And so that was the beginning of it. I'll let you go on from there. Yeah.
So while we were at that meeting, guys were kind of chatting in one area and women were chatting in another area. And one of the women that had been on the trip, she and her husband were interested in adoption. She was a nurse in Philadelphia Children's Hospital. And oftentimes in not just in Ghana, but in a number of countries, if there are children that are born with physical disabilities and families can't take care of them, they might be left at the hospital or something. And so she and her husband had expressed to the missionaries that they were interested in adopting an infant, and if any were abandoned, that they were interested in being contacted. And what she told us was that they had been contacted. There was a 6-year-old girl who was in need of a family, and that would have been you. And your Sunday school teacher was the missionary's house girl. And they were approached about whether or not they would adopt you. And what she had said was she had a lot of medical background and could certainly take a child with physical needs, but had no teaching background or anything. So a 6-year-old who didn't speak the language, who had not been in school or had any education like that could, speak English or anything, was more than she thought they could do. So she asked the team to pray for a family for you. So in the car on the way home, I said to Dad, I think we should pray about this. I think we might be the family for this little girl. And his response was,
What little girl? Right?
because he wasn't in there.
Right. I heard nothing about this conversation.
That's always my favorite.
This little
So that's my theory. That's why God has to go to the woman first, because she's the only one paying attention, listening to
in our case, that's absolutely true. So yeah, so we had this conversation on the car ride on the way home, and it was neat in a lot of ways, right? But also we recognized that this was not a, something you do like haphazardly, right? We wanted to be sure this was what God wanted us.
Because adoption had not been anything that
we never discussed it. We never, to my knowledge, really even considered it.
No.
We had our 2 kids, and life was what it was, but yeah, so we committed to pray about the decision, to hear from God what His leading was one way or the other. We talked to our 2 kids at the time. They were 11 and 7,
11 and
9, 11 and 9, 10, something like 10 and 12. But anyway, old enough to understand a lot of it, maybe not everything, but so we asked them also to pray. We felt like, this was a family impact, and God would give our family a consistent answer as to what He wanted us to do. So we invited them to pray too. And I think that was important for them to be part of the process as well. And also, just for spiritual learning and growth for them. It's like, you're part of the family, you're part of this decision. And this is how we make these kind of decisions, is we go to God and ask Him what He wants us to do.
So I think we all know what the consensus was, how you told us how you came to it, but I guess maybe what was the confirmation for you on what to do? So you're seeking God on it.
I don't remember there being a huge aha moment.
Yeah, no, I don't. Yeah, it wasn't like we heard voices or anything like that. We just, over time, and I don't think it was a long period, a couple weeks maybe, 10 days ish. We just felt
more, a peace about the whole,
like that God had orchestrated this for us specifically, and we knew that He would be with us through it all, and that was good because we would need Him, because we knew nothing, right? We'd never done anything about adoption. We never certainly looked into international adoptions. We had no idea of any of the legal steps or the process at all. We knew there was one. We had friends who had adopted through agencies that specialized in overseas things, so we were somewhat familiar. That there were quite a number of people in our church, in fact, that had done that, and that was a cool thing, because we felt like there was some support there that we could get, information, people that would understand what we were going through and could help, and but it was, but I don't want to make it sound like it was unclear, even though it wasn't, I'll say dramatic. I feel like we were all very confident that was what God wanted us to do. And we knew that it was going to be a bit of an adventure, but we had no idea really what that meant either. So it was a big faith step for us, but obviously, good one. And it had its challenges, and we could talk about that, but obviously it's turned out great. We're super happy with the result. So.
All right. So what do you do then? So you're in the U.S. I'm in Ghana. We don't know each other. And so you've just heard about me, and all you know is I'm a little girl in Ghana, about 6.
There were a couple of things that we did. The first was we wanted to make sure, and even though you were 6, and I don't think you really probably had any real understanding, America is very far away. And so it was important to us that the missionaries talk to you about this. So not just to your family, but that you were in agreement that
Mhm.
you would come and, that you were going to go to a new family
Mhm.
and all. And from what we understand, that, that, Maggie had talked to you
Maggie did.
and,
Mhm.
and that you were agreeable to that, although I don't think you really had any idea what that really meant.
Mhm.
Um, you know, uh, but so, and then we went about looking into what that process
Mhm.
really entailed. So, kind of had to go through, immigration. We had to go through um, the home study and all of that kind of stuff that they needed to do to make sure that we had to go through, all the fingerprinting, all of that kind of stuff to
Background
make
checks,
sure,
yeah.
yep, all the background checks and everything like that. And during that time, we had, you had not been in school,
Mhm.
and we were not sure. We'd been told different stories about where you were living, that you had been with relatives, then you'd gone to other places to live with other people. So the missionaries agreed to take you into their home. So we helped to subsidize your living with them and pay for you to go to school, because in Ghana, school doesn't cost anything, but you need uniforms and you need a desk and you need books
Mhm.
and all of that. We wanted you to start in Ghana. They teach school in English. So that would have given you a start with English. So that when you came, hopefully you would have a little bit of understanding, because we were told that this would be a fairly, long process between
Yeah.
the home study and all of that and the stuff with immigration.
Mhm.
So, and the missionaries had a son that was a year younger than you are. I think you're a year and a half. And living with them also gave you
Mhm.
more immersion into English language to be able to have an understanding of that.
Mhm.
So that's kind of where we went from there.
Yeah.
So you lived with them. They cared for you.
Mhm.
So we knew that you were someplace where you were
Mhm.
well cared for. You were learning English. You were going to school. You were getting meals
Mhm.
and all that. So and medical care.
Mhm.
So that was what we did on that aspect of it. The rest of it was all bureaucracy.
Yeah, just
And,
rules and paperwork and stuff. One of the things we did learn along the way was there were different rules for international adoptions and for adoptions within the state of New
Mhm.
Jersey. And there was a benefit for us we had to do the international adoption because of the nature of you being from overseas. But we were counseled that it was a good idea to do the New Jersey adoption too, because no matter where we went in the U.S., that adoption would be seen as valid, whereas the New Jersey rules and a different state might have different rules, and they might not respect that international adoption. So we went through both of those processes. We kind of did them in parallel as much as we could, although there was some serialness to it. Like you had to do the international part first before you could come over here and
Mhm.
finish the New Jersey stuff. But we did both of those things, and like Laurel said, there was a lot to it. Both them investigating our background, the nature of your being offered for adoption. There seemed to be a lot of, I'll say, protections in place, just desires for protection,
Mhm.
so that you weren't being exploited or sold to us in some capacity. Generally as kids get a little bit older and they can work, that becomes more, around age 16, that becomes more of a consideration. But it wasn't something that they ignored in this circumstance too. So there were all kinds of parts to
Safeguards.
it. Safeguards, yeah. And legal requirements and paperwork to fill out, and we got help with a lot of that stuff, and there was a lot to it, but it seemed to go along pretty well.
Yeah. What was also a real blessing to us in all of it was, as Dad said, when we went to Ghana, for both of us to go, we were in a place financially where,
Yeah.
I think we came back and we had about $40 in our checking account.
Yeah.
You know.
We had some
So-
long-term savings, but we didn't
Right.
really have,
But
we kind of exhausted our day-to-day living sort of budgets.
yes,
And we needed some financial support, and people in the church were quite generous with that.
and without asking,
Yeah.
you know, just by God's prompting.
Mm.
So,
Yeah.
you know, we would have people that were because it can be a very expensive process, particularly I think, you know, when you're
International.
going overseas.
Yeah, and we didn't have any adoption agency fees, so those were sort of a savings, I'd say. But,
Sure.
but there were things we had to do regardless. But yeah, it was, I mean, just looking back on it, you know, I think our focus was on just getting through the process,
Mhm.
doing the paperwork in a timely fashion, trying to push things along, trying to, you know, get things scheduled and done. We got a lot of help from the missionaries in Ghana. They were the local support. They had contacts there. They did all the paperwork and all the running around on that side. It was quite a bit that they did on our behalf.
Yeah.
But looking back on it, I feel like, you know, it was just further confirmation each step along the way that God was in this process and was enabling us to get things done. And frankly, in hindsight, it went along pretty quickly. I mean, I think we
Yeah, from what we
officially started
understand,
the process in April-ish timeframe, and you came over to live with us in early September. So, you know, it was 5 months.
quite quick.
Yeah. So, and you know, there were some more challenging days in there too, but all in all, it went well and it went quickly.
So, Mom, you end up coming to Ghana to get me. Can you tell us about that process? How did you guys decide that? Who's coming? And why did you come rather than me coming on my own? Like, what was that whole figuring out how you actually get me
Okay.
to New Jersey?
So the reason I went by myself,
Mhm.
and I didn't go by myself, the couple that had been interested in adopting a baby at that time, by that time, there had been a baby available. So they were going over as well. But the reason I went was that by that time, Dad had, first of all, exhausted all of his vacation on the first trip to Ghana. So to go back over would have been
Not impossible. What a burden.
would have been a
Yeah.
challenge.
Challenge.
Second of all, getting the approvals all through immigration had been very challenging. You know, it was a thing where you put your paperwork in and then you wait, and if you call and ask, it goes to the bottom of the pile and all of that. There had been numerous
Yes, our
things that
government's quite helpful.
numerous things like that. So, given the time change, immigration only took phone calls at that time. I don't know what they do now, between 2 and 4 on Tuesdays and Thursdays to inquire about status or any kind of issues that you had. Being in Ghana with the time change, with the ability to call and things like that, because this was 1997. You know, we weren't talking cell phones or
Right.
really anything like that. So we felt like having Dad here would be a really good thing for somebody that was here that could actually be doing that. So I ended up going over the adoption. We needed to do the adoption in Ghana. We actually went to court in Ghana and did the adoption. So that was, so one of us needed to go.
Mhm.
So the other thing that was going on at the time was there were a lot of refugees coming through Ghana. And there was the possibility that if we hadn't made our flight to come back, that it was going to take weeks to get us on another flight because people were coming through Ghana, going to the States or going other places.
Yeah, it
From
wasn't
the
unrest anymore.
unrest in
It was
Ghana.
but it was a jumping off point for people that were refugees from other
Mhm,
countries nearby.
countries. So, you know, to have both of us gone for possibly
Right.
weeks, extra weeks,
Mhm.
with kids at home and Dad's job and all. So,
Yeah.
so that's why I was the one that went.
It turned out to be quite helpful because there were a couple of paperwork snags. You know, Mom was talking about how there were no cell phones. There wasn't any email either. Everything was done by fax. We would fill out papers and fax them, over, and then you'd have to confirm it because they wouldn't call you up and say, we got this thing. You'd have to check and say, did you receive it? Yeah, we received it, or we didn't find it, so we fax it again or whatever.
And some things were acceptable to receive by fax, and some things actually had to be the actual physical paperwork that was sent. So
there was some of that too.
yeah.
Then there was a bit of a snag after you and the other family had arrived there. The paperwork that we had been told had been received and was all in order was suddenly missing. And
paperwork for you, their paperwork was
paperwork was, so, and we were told, well, what that means is you go kind of to the back of the line. And we're like, that doesn't seem right. And we tried to influence, our government reps to help us. And the folks that do this day to day had absolutely no interest in doing that for whatever reason. I ended up at Congressman Rob Andrews' office working with a lady that was in his office named Roberta. I'll never forget her name. But she was great.
Yep.
Suddenly, after the congressman got involved, everything was okay, which is wonderful, but at the same time, sort of, makes you a little frosted, right? That, like, why couldn't you have just done the right thing to start? But, so it turned out to be fortuitous that we had done it that way, because it would have been even more difficult to do that from overseas.
Long distance.
So there's a lot to it. And, again, in hindsight, as we look at it, you can just see God orchestrating all these steps. Sometimes we didn't even consciously make decisions, or we made them for other purposes, and they turned out to be used, in a way that we hadn't even anticipated they'd be needed. So God knew what needed to be done, even though we didn't.
Yeah, definitely. So, Mom, what was it like coming over?
I think it was exciting. The thought that I'm going to get to meet you. There was also, I don't want to say anxiety, but it was, there was some nervousness in that you don't know what to expect on that side. Very fortunate to have had the missionaries and the other family. So we had an incredible group of people back in the States praying for us, which really kind of gave a piece to that. Missionaries brought you and the other family's baby to Accra and met you at a hotel. And you and I stayed that first night in the hotel. Our kids had sent some little gifts for you and everything. And, it's just kind of an unreal thing, because it's a very different kind of waiting than when you're expecting a baby. And it also was really kind of fun because you were very interactive, and but it's a very different thing to meet a child who's 6 and be hopeful that you're comfortable and that you're not fearful of me, and that this is, your understanding is different than what the reality of it is going to be. And, that concern too, that this is my concern, I think, was more that this was going to be a good experience for you, as a kid, because this was a big, you'd already had a lot of loss, and obviously, trauma is probably not the right word, but just a lot of difficulties and just, very different, moving around. And everything. So, and this was going to be a big one. So, that concern too, that how you were going to feel about this.
Right. And I think we all knew that it was a big deal, but it also was something we really didn't know what to expect. Right, there were a lot of unknowns to it,
Yeah.
so it was exciting, and also,
Like, what are your language skills really going to be when we get there?
Sure.
Are you really going to understand me? Are we going to be able to communicate?
Yeah.
Although I have to say that one of the first, it was actually the second mission trip that I went on. My dear friend Carol went, and if she taught me nothing, she taught me that you don't need to speak the same language with kids to be able to really interact with them and show them God's love and your love. It was she, couldn't speak a word, and yet, those kids knew how much Jesus loved them and how much she loved them just by, her actions and her interactions. So, but it was something that I thought about.
So after you come, I guess I want to ask, what was the challenges with getting me settled here in the U.S.? We've come, we've gone back, and I do know some English speaking wise.
You were pretty good.
And I have the mix to thank for, because I was fully immersed, and then I had Maggie to fill in all the gaps. So I had basic stuff, preschool level speaking. But as you already mentioned, I hadn't gone to school very long, just a couple months. So I didn't have the literacy skills. What was all that like, getting me settled? And whoever wants to go first.
One of the things that I'll say is, you came across as you were very confident in yourself. So really understanding what you knew and what you didn't know was difficult to discern, because, and I don't know, that confidence was whether that confidence was just part of your personality, which I think is true. But I also think it might have been like, I don't want them to not know that I don't know. Like, I,
Sure.
Like an approval type thing. So, so there were different things that, we would find out that, you really didn't know exactly what we were talking about. One of them was like going to have your testing for vaccinations, and they were explaining to you, and you're like shaking your head and everything like that. And then they came at you with the needles, and like Dad had to hold, hold you.
You're very strong for a little bit.
Yeah. But so, there were things like that. There were, you came, you hadn't really been to school. I was working at preschool, Curiosity Corner at the time, and the director, Karen, had suggested she taught kindergarten. You probably were an age where you would have gone to
First grade. Second.
At that time, you would have been old enough to go to second grade.
Yeah, because you turned 7 during the adoption process.
Yep. So, so by the standards where we were in New Jersey, you would have made the cutoff to go to second grade. Public school was like, yeah, we're going to put her in, she doesn't have any language skills.
Right?
They did an assessment, and that was quite interesting, because I had told them and that you really didn't speak English, and having been a preschool teacher, I know there's ways to assess without your language skills being really good. But the person doing the assessment came out and said she doesn't speak English. It's like, well, she does, but
I already told you.
So Karen had suggested that you come to her kindergarten class, and we'd start you there, because you came right at the beginning of the school year, and they wouldn't do those assessments at that point.
Yeah, it's a busy time.
Anyway.
So there was like I think in October, early October was when they would first consider adding a new student to the school,
Right.
so they could get through all the beginning of school transition and settling in with all the rest of the kids, right?
So Karen taught kindergarten, and so you went to her kindergarten class, which is where they had wanted to put you in public school. And Karen came to me after about 2 weeks and said, "You're doing her a disservice. She catches on really quickly. She knows a lot. She should really be in first grade. If we were in first grade, you would only really there are a lot of kids that are, especially kids that are late summer birthdays, that would have been in first grade, that would have been the same age as you. You wouldn't have been a couple of years behind, which might not have mattered at that point, but eventually in your education, you'd have been much older than the kids that you were with. And Karen said, you're doing her a disservice. She can do this, So went to the school. You were going to be at Blackwood with the ESL program. And they really fought me about putting you in first grade. You couldn't read. You didn't have any of those reading skills. You didn't have any of the math skills, any of that pre-language stuff. And I volunteered. I said, I will teach her. I teach preschool. I will teach her the kindergarten stuff at the same time that she's in first grade. And they kind of begrudgingly agreed to that. And I think you did go down to the first grade class to go to the reading groups at some like a pull-out, the kindergarten class.
I did for literacy with Miss G. I still remember her. I saw her at Duffield's when I was like 13. And yeah.
And to their credit, they they gave us the opportunity to do that.
Yeah.
Now there were things at school.
It was very clear they didn't think we were making the right decision, but they went along with it, I think, based on the strength of your mom's personality and her unwillingness to bend. And again, that was based on her own experiences and, Karen, who knew you, and frankly,
and also had a child that was adopted from overseas that came. So she had walked that journey as well. She had adopted an older child. So, yeah.
Right. And I think the principal was trying to, do what she thought was the right thing, both for you and for the school, right? It doesn't help the school to have, a student in the class that just can't keep up, right? So I think their motivations were, genuine, it just was a disagreement on what the right approach was. And ultimately it turned out that, your mom was right. You were a quick learner, just like Karen had said, and you picked up a lot of things. The two of you worked very hard together, it all came out.
But there were some things that like your first day there, you just left and went outside after lunch. Yep, because who puts the new child from a foreign country at the end of the line, who just saw the open door and thought, it's schools in Ghana, you can come and go and all, and but we caught on pretty quickly as to when you really didn't understand something. If you didn't understand it, you repeated it like you were trying to figure out what it was. If you told us you didn't understand, you understood perfectly what we were talking about.
Right, you were working things.
Yep.
Which you were quite good at.
But
they weren't as smart as my mom.
No, school needed some help knowing that was.
Yeah,
but
your first grade teacher, bless her heart, she was a great lady, but she was very, very new. I mean, it might have even been her first year. I'm not sure. But, so, she was at a steep learning curve even without, having complications of, your situation, which is unique, right?
But what we found was that if we said something to you, like if I said to you, get your book bag, and you went, get my book bag, get my book bag. I knew that you didn't understand, and I could say, your backpack. And you'd be like, oh, and you'd go get your backpack. If I used a terminology, a vocabulary that you didn't know, you tended to repeat it like you were trying to figure out what it was. So it didn't take long to figure out the things that you really understood. And you caught on very quickly to everything. And, and there were some fun ones. I mean, there was the night that we were sitting around the table and we were having spaghetti, and I like this thin angel hair spaghetti. And your sister said, is this angel hair? And I said, yeah. And you spit it all out and went, oh, I'm eating angel's hair. It's like, that's what we call it. It's really spaghetti. It's okay to eat.
Yeah.
It's
But
food, it's not hair.
yeah.
Right. So some of those kind of fun.
But I do remember asking you, one of my favorite Naomi stories is asking you, we were in the car and you were talking about your brother and you were just like, seemed like so enamored. And I said, you really love your brother and sister. I said, you like it here with us? And you said, "Oh, I love it here in heaven." And I said, "Hun, this is Jersey.
Right.
This isn't heaven."
Right.
And you were like, "Oh, yes, it is." I went up, up, up into the sky and came down, down, down into the light, because it was when we landed, all the lights of the and everything. And I thought to myself, it must have been, when we talk about heaven, you talk about, being loved, having your needs met. And it's like, but I just remember thinking, wow, I don't think anybody's ever referred to New Jersey.
Yeah. And our house was no great shakes,
Nope.
but, it was certainly, beyond normal Ghana standards, for the village that you came from. So it might have seemed like a beautiful place, right?
But it was just, that's Jersey.
That's
Yeah.
fun.
Not heaven.
Right. Not quite. All right. So you're getting me settled into school. And then I guess what happens? Okay, what I want to ask now is probably what was the biggest challenge you faced? So you mentioned school. Was there any other challenges that you had with adjusting me to life in the family or in the US or?
You adjusted really.
Yeah, I think you did well. I mean, there were some practical considerations. Right? We had a 3-bedroom house. We had 1 bedroom. Matt and Jess each had their own rooms, right? 1 boy, 1 girl. And Jess had the smaller bedroom. We debated about moving, because you were going to have to share with Jessica her bedroom, moving you guys into the bigger room. And we ultimately decided not to do that. Just to keep things as the same as we could and make it as least disruptive as we could, and I remember your siblings just being like super cooperative with all those things. I'm sure it was difficult for them, in ways that I probably don't even understand because we were in a different kind of relationship and doing things at a different level. But they were super great about it.
I think one of the biggest challenges was that you had been, even at 6, so very independent in Ghana.
Yeah.
And in Ghana, people walked everywhere, people did things. And so rules were difficult. Brother and sister had grown up with our rules. So they knew the rules. You had to be taught, the rules and the standards in our house. And I can remember you saying, "How come I'm the only one that has rules?" And it's like, you're not the only one that has rules. They've known the rules. They've grown up with them from infancy to, 11 and 13. You're learning all of them now. But I can remember you deciding that you wanted to go visit one of your friends. And, it was 2 miles.
Yeah.
And you were like, I'm like, well, we don't just go there. And second, you can't walk. Sure, I can. Like, you knew,
I've got legs.
you knew where it was, and you were just gonna, go. So that kind of, you can't just leave the house and go, which is what you were used to doing, which was very much the culture. The kids kind of took care of each other. The older kids watched the younger kids. You, even at 6, were considered one of the older kids to watch out for the younger kids. So that kind of freedom to just kind of go was something that, we were not used to. And it's like, no, you can't just walk 2 miles to a friend's house.
Right. Who doesn't know you're coming?
At age 7. So yeah.
Yeah. And all in all, my memories of it are very pleasant. I feel like the transition went way better than we anticipated it to go. I mean, there were some, other things too. Like, Mom always had short hair. Jessica had longer hair, but it was straight, white person hair. Your hair was different. We had no real understanding of how to do that, just because there was no, no way to learn that. One of the ladies at church, helped mom learn how to do your hair and all those kinds of things. We had
and very kindly.
Yeah.
Come over and people came alongside us, and she came over and she's like, you're doing a really good job, but this is very different. I can help you if you'll let me.
Yeah.
And it was like, great, we'll take all the help we can get.
Right. So, it was neat in that regard. Just another way that God provided everything we needed.
Do you want to give us a hair story, Mom? She's like, to relive those days.
I don't like to relive the hair story.
Yeah, I just remember that the straightening of your hair so that it could be styled was quite difficult, and there were chemicals and
just for me. Remember that?
a lot of tugs.
Yep.
And it was one of those rare things that the two of you, I'll say, fought about, because there were disagreements, and there were, like you said, just expectation differences. You thought you could do things that we thought were not age appropriate. Those kind of things, I think, were much more normal and just, relatively easy to get through. That was one that was kind of recurring and challenging. You hated it when Mom straightened your hair. Mom didn't feel like she was particularly good at it. And it was like...
One of your problems with it was that you don't like to sit still very long.
That's true.
And it takes
a while.
It takes a while.
We also used a hot comb.
Yes.
And, my ears
I'm sure that didn't feel super
would get
Yep.
cinched a few times.
Yeah. So I just remember at one point, like, after listening to, I don't know, however many back and forths there was in this episode of
Hair time.
ongoing hair kind of conflict, just saying, like, look, I have a job. We're just going to take some of my job money, and you're never doing her hair again. I don't remember making many proclamations as the husband in the house, but that was one. I put my foot down and said, yeah, this is just not going to go on this way. This is just not tenable. And, I think it was a good decision. Frankly.
Yeah.
So
I think that's when we started going to the lady in Blackwood.
Yeah. High school. Yeah.
Who ran the salon.
Yep.
That was our first place.
Yeah.
I think we went to. And she started. Yeah.
Yep.
No, I mean, we were family. I mean, I had a decent job, but we had now 3 kids. Mom worked part-time at the preschool that she was at, so she was getting part-time wages for part-time hours, so not nothing, but it wasn't, huge contributions to the finances of the family. So we're always trying to kind of figure out ways to get by with what we had. And so, the financial impacts of it were, it was expensive to get your hair done. Didn't have to happen, super often, but but it was a commitment that we made, and and again, God just took care of it for us. It was sometimes you fret those things and wonder, like, how are we going to make this work? And not that was particularly burdensome, but just just in general, right? You think about those things, and it's just God worked it out, and it was all good, and there was peace in the house, which was great.
Yeah. But I do want to go back to your schooling.
Yeah.
Because I will say that you were in the what they now call the ELL program, and Mrs. Jimenez was wonderful. But you were in that program for a year and a half, maybe a year before you tested out of the program. You stayed there because they monitored you for like 2 years, might have been 2 years, but I mean, you were third grade. You tested out of the program pretty quickly with your language skills because of your determination and your drive for that. So because they told me when they tested you and they were like, this doesn't happen very often that someone moves through this ELL program at this pace.
Yeah, I think you worked very hard. I also feel like one of the things we learned that was a part of education that we'd had no exposure to, even though the woman was in education, right? That whole English as a second language learning was, a specialty that we hadn't been exposed to. And frankly, most of the families that we met at the school, dad worked here in America. They were first generation, kind of, the mom and dad, or maybe their parents had come over. So they hadn't been in America long. And the moms, it seemed in particular, knew the original language, but not necessarily English so well. And that's what they spoke at home.
Right.
So you were immersed in English because that's all we knew, right? We didn't have, we got books on your native language. You looked at it. And it was
But you couldn't read it.
You couldn't
Yeah,
read it.
we
You
couldn't pronounce it or read it. So,
Right. So
to be able to keep that up
it turned out to
for
be
years.
just impractical. There was just nothing we could do there. So you were, full blown immersion into our family and our language skills, which were English only. And I think that helped to push you through too, because you had no fallback to the other things. But still, I mean, no doubt you worked very hard at it, which has been characteristic of you on pretty much everything. But it was, it's noteworthy for sure.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you guys want to add about raising me, getting me?
It's interesting the perspective that you gain over time, right?
Okay.
Like when we first were embarking on the process, I remember talking to Pastor Ed, the senior pastor at our church. It was new for us. We thought we would, and he was one that had adopted kids internationally. Actually, he and his wife had, I don't remember if they had one or two kids at that time, but they ended up with two.
Oh, just wanted that.
Yeah, but he'd been through that process. So he felt like not only spiritually, but also practically, he could offer some counsel for us. And I remember him talking to us about it a couple times, and just some, random thoughts that go through your head. Like I remember thinking, like, I have two kids, and I love them a lot. And now here's this third kid coming into the family. Like, how could I love her like I should? And sorry.
That's good.
I just remember him telling me, like, it's not like there's this pie and you have to take like away from what your other kids are getting for this third one. And I was just thinking about it the wrong way and not, and it bothered me because I was like, how's this going to work out? Right. Practically. And so there were things like that too, that, I feel like were, I don't want to say struggles because I don't remember them lasting particularly long, but there were uncertainties and challenges across the board that I just feel like in hindsight, they either went away on their own and I didn't even know they were an issue, probably, or if I was aware of them, there was always a resolution, and it was always, it worked out that, it was just very confirming that, you can't outlove God. He gives you
The grace for it.
Yeah, he gives you what you need, right? Yeah, and I remember telling people, and I've said it many times since, that we had this gap in our family we didn't know we had till you came and filled it up.
I love you guys. All right, Dad. I know it's up, but I do want to ask. So, what advice would you give to families like that who, because I've had a couple people reach out to me, and one of the persons has two kids of their own. They've got two boys. They still would like to adopt. So if they have that concern, how do you do that where you have kids of your own and you're going to also adopt?
Yeah.
What would you say now that you've done it?
A couple things I would say. First, principal thing, the fundamental one thing that I think you shouldn't do it without is understanding that this is God's purpose for you and your family, because it's disruptive and it's challenging.
And it can be the biggest blessing.
Yeah, but it's a huge blessing too, and I feel like, the other sort of practical advice I would give is don't overthink it, right? There's preparation and things to be done, but you just kind of focus on the next thing and do the best you can on that next thing, because there's a lot to it. you know, when you go back and you think about all the things that we went through, you know, just the practical impacts, and you know, if you told me how much time it would take, and could we find that time in our lives the way they were, and would be like, there's no way. But the truth is, you make time for things that are important, and it all works out, you know. But ultimately, you know, it's worth it, right? There's nothing better than, you know, following God's lead in your life and doing what He has called you to do. You know, not to sound selfish about it, but the benefits of it have far outweighed anything it cost us time-wise, financially, whatever it was, you know. And I, you know, so just from a personal perspective, I would say it's extremely rewarding. I mean, I think raising kids has its challenges, whether they're, you know, your biological kids or otherwise. And, you know, but it's one of those things that it's worth the difficulties. You know, they say that the days are long and the years are short of being a parent. And that's absolutely true. And I would say that to parents that are considering it, you know, so make the most of the time you have, but also, you know, don't be afraid to do what you think is
God's leading you to
yeah,
do.
God's leading you to do. And you know, yeah, it's great. Yeah. And then, you know, just spiritually, you know, I think it's a tremendous witness to people around you. We didn't have any inkling in our mind, you know, here we are, a family like so many others where we lived, you know, a couple kids, and they looked like us, and you didn't look like us, right? You were Black and our kids weren't. And so people remembered us when we went places. We'd go out to eat after church on Sundays, or like the lady in the Walmart, you know, checkout line would remember us and greet us like we were friends. You know what I mean? It was, and the only explanation I have for that is they noticed us because we were different, you know, than other families. And I think that's a tremendous opportunity to do good in the world that God provides for us. You know, there's need. We have the opportunity to meet a need, and you know, and God's not just about that, although He is. You know, you had a need, we had this gap that I said in our family we didn't even know was there, and it, you know, it all worked out tremendously well just for us individually and as a family, but far beyond that, you know, too, people that knew us and knew you and saw the thing we were doing, you know. So many people that I worked with that I had really no practical way to be, I'll say, involved in any kind of spiritual conversations with them. It became very much just part of the discussion, because like people would always ask, well, why did you do this? How did you do this? And we got a chance to say, well, God told us to do it. People are like your question at the beginning, like, what does that look like?
And He walked us through it.
Yeah,
He walked with us through it, provided for it.
And it's been even better than we imagined it could be.
And has blessed us amazingly through it. And the blessing continues, right? The blessing continues in that, you know, we have you, right? We have now your biological family. We have Albert. We have his mom. You know, I mean, we just
school and college. We would never have known these people.
We've got that your whole church family now up in New York who have embraced us. You know, it has just, you know, God has blessed us. You know, even continues that blessing. You know, even more as we, you know, and we never could have imagined how far-reaching His blessing would be. From, you know, I think we might be the family, you know, to where we are today, and it continues. You know, it continues from you know, from here on, even, and it's, you know, it's just, you know, amazing to see, you know, the story, you know, just continue, and it, you know. We talk about sometimes, like, when we were younger, did we ever
think we'd have a life like we have?
you know, and it's like, no, because we never thought beyond like the moment or a few years, right? We often say we never thought we'd be this old.
Yeah, you know,
But it's like, you know,
certainly
when we were
kids and grandkids.
when we were in the beginning of doing this, it was just like, okay, you're coming into our family. Our family is growing, but the how much and how big the blessing is from that is something beyond what we ever could have imagined.
For sure.
Yeah.
The other thing I would say is, you know, adoption is a great picture of the way God treats us, right? We're all adopted into God's family as his children, you know, and the sacrifice that Jesus made for us, you know, and, you know, I have an understanding of that I never would have had without going through this process. And I feel like it's, you know, it's just foundational to the Christian faith to understand that concept that, you know, we all get, God wants us in his family. He wants to pursue us. He wants to adopt us and make us his children. And we got to see a little bit of that in our own lives too, what it's like, you know, and what that means from his perspective in a small way, right? You know, as the parents that are bringing someone new into the family, it's sacrifice and it's hard work, but it's absolutely worth every bit of it, you know, and the motivation of it. Back to my little, like, how am I going to love this little girl? Like, I only have this much love. Well, guess what? That's not true. You know, God's love will permeate and grow, and I'm a different person than I was and could ever be if this hadn't happened.
All right. So for you, Mom, so you had more of a little different challenge. So what was it like getting over like intimidation, having a Ghanaian child, me having black hair, and having to navigate that? So parents who are adopting outside their race, how did you get over that? Now, the way I can remember, Mom, even when you first came to Ghana, I talk a little bit about that. When you found out I wasn't taking my medicine, and you know, it was a little bit easier for me to finagle my way, and I learned to be very independent. And so I even say that when I tell my story, like that's kind of how I knew, like there was a new sheriff in town. So I would also say you came in with the confidence too. Maybe because you worked with children,
I think
you were a lot more comfortable with me than I would say other adults. So I think that gave you an advantage too. But what would you say to others, and you getting over doing my hair, and even being so open to accept help, and go to salons and just utilize?
I think there's a couple of things. I think, you know, working with kids and everything, you know, and your brother will say, you know, when he went to do his student teaching, most people have difficulty with classroom control. And I don't think he'd done that for maybe a couple of days. And the teacher that he was working under said, came from a strict upbringing, didn't you? It's like, you know, but I think, you know, in that respect, it was like I already, you know, I was used to being the sheriff in my classroom, right? I was used to being, you know, the grown up in charge. I think that, and I already had 2 kids at home that were preteen and everything. So, you know, it really didn't parent you any differently than I parented them. And I think that was probably a big thing, was many people when we adopted you were like, you know, you'd had a challenging childhood. Even your teacher at school wanted to
not punish me,
make up for that.
Yeah.
And sadly for you, because I can remember, them calling me after like 2 days and being like, she really shouldn't be here. She really can't do school. She gets up, she wanders around. She's a distraction. She won't, well, and she just doesn't understand. And it's like, well, how do you know she doesn't understand? She says, I don't understand. I said, yeah, she's, by then I had realized that you repeated things. So
She knows sit down.
so I talked to them about, this is how you know if she really doesn't understand. She will repeat what you said. What do you do? What consequence do you give her if she continues to be redirected and she doesn't do it? Well, she does. Well, and we feel bad. She's not, and I'm like, well, what consequences does everybody else get? Well, they get time taken off recess. Take time off for recess.
Lose your stars.
Oh, we don't really want to do. And it's like, no, I think, you got held to the same standard as your siblings, because it only took 2 days before they called me again and said, hey, that worked. And it's like, yeah, hey, you weren't giving her any consequences. But I think that was one of the things, was just the rules weren't different for you. Now, there was maybe more explaining, there was more redirection, but that redirection was to the same rules as everybody else had. It wasn't like you got to pass because, of your background. So I think that was a big thing in terms of
Right, and ultimately the purpose of discipline is for your good, right? It helps, broadly too, but really it's for you, right?
Yeah.
You have to learn how to, work and do to be a student. These are the expectations. You can't succeed at that without meeting those expectations. It's just fundamental.
But the other thing is that I think with things like hair and other things, I think, you have to know that I don't know it all, so I'm willing, it's like, I don't know. If somebody's willing to help me, and I don't know what I don't know, so when somebody comes, and I kind of feel like, particularly like my friend Tony, who actually was willing to step out of her comfort zone and say, this is different, and I don't want to hurt your feelings. I don't want. It's like, that was very. To me, it was very brave of her to to be like, hey, they're looking at that kid going, white mom, and but it's like, right. But I really, when somebody is willing to come alongside you and help you, and teach you, not not necessarily like bust in and do everything for you, but it's like, I'm going to teach you. It's like, we are
criticizing, right?
But we're forever learners, and I feel like we need to accept that, and learn from the people who, does everybody who thinks they, know better? No, but God will give you the discernment to know who really is there helping you, what help you really need.
And it also helps us, right? That humility to accept help from people is something that can be difficult, and I think, I'm a different person than I was. I think you are too, because we had to recognize that we had limitations and needed help, and whether it was financial help or whatever, right? And, these are things that sometimes people aren't willing to even say that they can use help with. And I remember in the moment never feeling like I needed to hold back on any of that stuff, which isn't my personality. I'm not someone that like is all that open frankly.
Mhm.
You know, and it's not that I like secretive. I just like I'm about my stuff, and you know I'm fine, right? And I'll figure it out. You know, that's kind of my life. If you know, if you would say, you know, the way I was, and I feel like God broke down some of that by showing me that, first of all, by overcoming whatever it was that kept me from doing that to begin with, so that we would ask for help when we needed it. And secondly, showing us that, like, hey, it was helpful. Like, why wouldn't you do this?
Yep.
You know, just practically, it's like, this is beyond what you can do.
I think praying for discernment, right?
Yeah.
There were things that there were people that thought they knew better, that really pushed, you know, like the school,
Mhm.
right? And
Yeah.
it's like, you know, discernment to know when, you know, when what somebody is suggesting
Yeah.
or offering is helpful and wise, or when, you know, it's like, no, you know what, I don't feel like this is the path that.
And God's the source of wisdom, so that's where that comes from, right? These people weren't malintended, and maybe that would have been the right answer in most cases, right? But in your case, it wasn't. So you know, we had to just do what we had to do to advocate for you.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for sharing.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
So I want to close off with a little light, fun question.
Okay.
I'm going to start with you, Mom. So if you had to watch one sitcom on reboot over and over again, I already know what it is.
Really?
But they don't know what it is. What would it be, and maybe why? If you've got a reason.
A sitcom. Oh no.
Oh, okay.
Ask me
A TV show. A TV show.
Scarecrow, Mrs. King.
Yeah. You're right. I like sitcoms. Dad, you are the jokester in the house. All of our funny bones come from you.
Oh wow, that's scary.
It is kind of, yeah.
So, gonna ask your best dad joke to send us off
Wow.
on something light. Make it a good one.
Yeah, there are
no good
to start with. So that's impossible. But I will tell you what I've heard recently. I actually heard it from my granddaughter. She said, why was the why did the baby shrimp not share his toys?
Why did the baby?
Shrimp not share his toys? Because he was a little shellfish.
Wow. All right. And that's it.
Great.
Thank you so much for watching. I love all the amazing gems that I got to take away from my parents. There were things that even I didn't know. I hope that for those considering adoption or have been adopted, that this is a story that helps, gives you freedom, and gives you some wisdom as you go through your journey. And always remember that you are loved, God loves you, and that you've been chosen for his good purpose. Until next time, be blessed.